Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, wherever you might be. I think we have a critical mass of people, so I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, Breaking Down Data Silos and Unifying Reference Data Collection for Force Monitoring. This session is part of our ongoing work on MRV, Monitoring, Reporting, and Verification under AIM for Forest. Is a critical effort to us that basically derives directly from our technical interactions in collaboration with countries that we do support. So it's one of our long-term activities. And today we're going to address one of the core causes of inconsistencies in measurements, which results from parallel reporting on land use change, and which might derive from various reporting obligations, both at national but also at international level. And in the next hour, we will see more in detail what are the current challenges, review the overlaps in reporting, highlight the benefit of unified data collections, and provide a data collection survey template that is engineered in a way that it ensures that the reference data collected fulfills all the specific information needs for various reporting frameworks. The agenda, and maybe we can start sharing the screen. This time. The agenda is broken down in five parts basically. We're having a bit of introduction from our colleague here, Marike Sandkar, which will give us an overview of the current reporting frameworks, the resultant data silos, and the information needs. Myself, I'm going to introduce the concept around the multi-purpose response design template that we're going to provide. And then our colleague Laura Daietti is going to give a live demo in Collect Earth Online to see how this actually can be used by practitioners. Following, we're going to have a question and Q&A session, and then some closing remarks. A bit of housekeeping for the
Yes, it's
next slide, please. That was one too much. Sorry, having a bit of technical issues. I hope you understand. A bit of housekeeping. We would like to ask you to keep your microphone muted so we don't have any disturbing noise. For questions and interactions, please feel free to use the Q&A or the chat to submit questions at any time, and we're going to address them then in a dedicated Q&A part. For your info, the webinar is going to be recorded, and this will also be shared, the recording, alongside the slides and the supporting material. And I think with this, I will give the floor to Marike, who is giving us a nice introduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andreas. Can you move to the next slide, please? So basically, countries have different reporting streams, different responsibilities, and are assessing areas of forest and forest change in different contexts. So under the UNFCCC, developing countries are submitting biannual transparency reports every 2 years, and these are focusing on the latest progress and achievements in implementing the Paris Agreement. Then there are national communications which are submitted every 4 years, providing a broader overview of climate action and commitments. And then countries on a voluntary basis can also get involved in REDD+ reporting. So reference level submissions can be submitted once per year, but at any time, basically, there is no specific deadline for that. And then once they achieve results and want to report this against their reference level, they can include it in a technical annex to their BTR. Next. So the context of this reporting is different, as mentioned. So for the greenhouse gas inventory reporting, so in the BTRs and the national communications, the objective, it really aims to be complete and neither over nor underestimate emissions and removals. While REP Plus reporting is in the context of getting access to results-based payments. So many countries do not want to overestimate. They want to be a little bit conservative. So that context is already different. Now, on top of this, we have the timing, the time series that are covered in these different reporting streams. So the modalities, procedures, and guidelines to the UNFCCC's transparency framework suggests that BTRs start the time series in 1990 with flexibility for developing countries, but at a minimum, it should cover the reference period of countries' nationally determined contributions. On the other hand, RED Plus reporting, since this is the reference level, the benchmark against which implementation is assessed, there is a preference for more shorter periods. So for the Green Climate Fund, the period has to be between 5 to 10 years. But then countries can also seek beyond the UNFCCC climate finance payments, for example, to our trees. And, for our trees, the period has to be 5 years. So we're looking at much more recent periods there. Now, beyond climate finance, there's also new opportunities for finance through forest, more of a conservation payment through the Tropical Forest Forever facility. But this again comes with very specific requirements and more specific thresholds to participate. So countries find themselves in all these different contexts, and ideally they want to have data that is aligned, that is consistent, to avoid any confusion. Next slide, please. So there is, however, a lot of overlap in this reporting. So all of these different reporting streams, even though the context is different, all of them seek to have robust area estimations for land use categories and changes in land use categories. All of them want to have consistency over time. It has to be the same method. It has to be comparable over time. So there has to be this consistency. Estimates need to be accurate. There should not be any bias, especially in the context of results-based payment. We do not want to overestimate volumes. There should be a minimization of measurement error, and all of them need some kind of protocol and consistent methodologies that are applied. Next slide, please. So what we see with the area assessments for countries over time is that basically we can see three different methods that are being used. So the first one is a purely sample-based assessment. So here in this case, the country will use samples and distribute them either through a systematic grid or through a simple random sample over the entire country. Then we have what we call stratified area estimation. This is more like a map-assisted sampling. So it still uses sample. It's still a sample-based area estimation, but it uses also a map. So the map will be used to stratify the sampling. And then finally, we have purely map-based approaches, but still, we need to have some idea of the quality of the map. So countries do want to then perform an accuracy assessment. So all three of these cases have this design-based inference, that this statistical framework for getting information on the feature of interest. Next slide, please. So here's what we look, if we look a bit closer at the reference level submissions over time, we can see the different methods in area estimation that countries have applied. And we can see that, especially in the beginning of the reporting, there was a very strong preference of using maps only. Not always were these accompanied by full and transparent accuracy assessment. So we do see a little bit a shift away from maps only to a combination of maps and samples, or samples only, which are the green colors in the bar. And if you'd like more information on all these different choices that countries have made, there's a QR code here for a dashboard where we can see all this information of country submissions over time. Slide, please. Right. So why then, if it's clear that countries would like to have consistent and the same estimates that do not seem to contradict each other, why then do we have an issue with sometimes differing estimates? Well, there's multiple reasons, of course. So here we just point at two. So there is sometimes a bit of a, let's call it siloed financing for specific activities. So there's a project, it's time bound, there is a limited amount of funding, and perhaps money is received for producing one map, for producing one reference level submission, and that's it. There's a beginning, there's an end. But obviously it doesn't stop there. Countries will need to consistently continue with the same methodology, with the same frequency, and sometimes the funding cycles do not really align well with this. Then on the other end, we also have like institutionally, sometimes the reporting mandates differ, and like one group in the government may prefer one method over another one, and this could also result in somewhat differing estimates. One, please. So all of these hinder the adoption of a consistent response design. Yet by establishing a single harmonized response design and a pooled data collection architecture, the per plot cost of can really be reduced dramatically. And that efficiency would allow the overall system to achieve a higher sampling intensity using the same budget. Now, and if we then would have some, let's say, budget saving, there could be more of an investment in quality control of the data, which is a very relevant aspect as well. So by pooling the reference data, we can help increase the effective sample size, and increasing the sample size will give you more precise estimates with a smaller confidence interval. So the consistent reporting across all streams is key to minimizing this sampling error. Okay, perfect. So this ensures the estimates for the PTRs could be perfectly consistent with those used in national communications, in REP Plus reporting, and therefore we could eliminate politically and scientifically complex issue of non-comparable figures. So for data to become a single source, robust, and statistically current. So with this, I would like to hand over to Andreas for the next part.
Many thanks, Marika. So many thanks, Marika, for this nice overview. I think that was very informative. And I'm going to speak now about the survey template that we developed here at FAO, and give an introduction to then what Laura is going to present in the live demo. I guess most of you who are participating in this webinar already do know what a response design is, but maybe for those that are not having a super clear idea on that, basically it it determines the protocol that governs the collection of reference data. And by this, it should ensure that the observations are objective, they're repeatable, and they directly address the statistical parameters that are going to be estimated. And you can see on the right, there are different building blocks to them. They all interact with each other. And basically, all elements are somewhat important to maintain consistency. In this webinar, we're going to focus on the survey, but of course also the applied classification system, the definitions that are applied, even the imagery that is being used, they all will somewhat contribute to consistent estimates. Now, despite increasing sophistication of automated mapping procedures, AI, and so on, this data collections, they're still a human-driven process, and this is critical to understand because the human judgment that translates the observation into classification is still considered the primary control for mitigating non-sampling error and ensuring that this is a um, a consistent process really helps to then report uh, accordingly. Next slide. Because it's a human-driven process, and we basically need a lot of samples usually. So here in this image, we can see that this is how usually those mapathons or this data collection campaigns look like. Indeed, this is an example from Indonesia from last year, where about more than 20 people sat together for about 2 weeks to interpret around 5,000 points. And depending on the sampling design, the number of points that need to be interpreted can easily go up also to 20 or 30,000 points, for example, in the case of systematic samples or simple random samples. And so for the interpreters itself, it's a very repetitive task that inevitably leads also to errors because of interpreter fatigue and other sources. So as you can imagine, like with all this number of points and the effort that is behind, it's very tedious, it's also costly, and again, as I said already, error prone. Usually what the interpreter sees is such an image here, where you basically you have a sampling unit, and on the right, we're basically having a survey. And this is what we're going to talk about today. As Marika pointed out, our objective really is to collect once, use many, or this is what we're encouraging to the countries, to basically go from this redundant effort to somewhat unified effort. And this is pretty similar actually to what you do if you just report to like one stream, because at the beginning, usually what you need to do is to collect the information needs that are needed for specific reporting. Once you have this, you can set up the survey, you're doing the data collection, you're doing the analysis, and then finally you're going to report. Now, just to introduce what Laura then will live show. So in a simplified workflow, basically, step one is this information needs assessment, and there's some accompanying material that we're going to share. And the first one is this information needs table, where right now you cannot see very well what's written in there, but Laura was going to show that more detail. Basically, we're covering like different frameworks from UNIFCCC reporting, out trees, and so on. And then you can see like which questions basically need to answer, because the idea behind this templates is that we do have a complete template that contains all of the questions. And then whatever are your specific needs, you can then either take out questions or just report to all of them. In the second step, you will need to customize the survey a bit. It is impossible for us to really come up with a 100% template that just fulfills all the needs of all different nations or people who want to report, just because of specifics that are specific to each country. And we have two solutions basically for these data collections and for the creation of the survey. One is Collect Earth Online, and the other one in this case is Collect, that is part of our Open Foris suite that you can find under openforis.org. In the third step, you're basically going to collect the data. Therefore, again, in Collect Earth Online or with Collect Earth, I'm pretty sure like people who are attending this webinar are already familiar with that. And then there are also analysis capabilities within our CPOL platform that can basically then help you getting the estimates out of the data that is collected. And the fourth step, once you have your estimate, is then to report. And the idea is that basically with the different analysis tools, you can basically then streamline the reporting towards like these different frameworks that Marike nicely introduced. Regarding the survey is structured and comes out of a year-long experience that we have when we work with countries. So it's structured in a way that it has 3 cards, at least like in Collect Earth Online. In Collect Earth, it looks a bit different because of the way the software works. But the first card is the current land use. So we're basically asking the interpreters to characterize whatever sample they're looking at the end year of the survey, which usually is like the most recent years. So in this case, for example, could be 2025. And then they're going to start with IPCC classes, going to subdivisions, and going through all of the questions. And Laura is going to show that later. The reason for going backwards is that usually in the latest years, we have better imagery, and that allows us better to start with what are the land use conditions as of today. And then it's also easier to extract like this information of how the distribution of land use looks as of today. In a second step, we would basically then go back in time. We would characterize if there's a change, the most recent change or disturbance. And in the third step, we would go to the second most recent change and disturbance, and so on, if there are like more changes that want to be recorded over time. For the template right now, we consider like a maximum of 2, but they can be enhanced. And for this, we're going to, I know, the other card too. For this, we basically have the second card, which is like the land use change or disturbance card, and this is where basically then the interpreter can describe all the different disturbances. And this is also, again, is shown by Laura later today. And in a third card, we also add some questions that are specific to the data quality management and to the interpretation of the specific sample. This, for example, ask like the difficulty of interpretation. Was it easy? Was it hard? What are the reasons for the difficulty? For example, is it a heterogeneous landscape? Is there imagery missing? And so on. And this should really help us to then target also revision of samples where we might not be sure, or that can be revised together with the experts. And also for accuracy assessment, where we're having some future work on fuzzy accuracy assessment. Before we switch to the live demo, just want to give a quick outlook for future steps. So we're going to continue with those webinars where we're going to continue about response design harmonization, not only looking at the survey, but also at the other aspects of the building blocks that I was talking about. Also how that interacts with the sampling design, considering the multi-temporal aspects and an operational monitoring scheme, as well as new methods that we're already piloting in some of the countries regarding the data quality management. Another step that is going to follow is that based on those templates, we're going to provide tools that help you in the analysis and creating dashboards, and eventually also like facilitate like the report generation towards the reporting streams. And another interesting area that we're exploring right now is fuzzy accuracy assessment. I was saying in the third card, we're basically going to answer, if you wish to do that, different information about the collection itself, and this can be used to actually enhance the estimation framework. And with this, I'm done, and I'd like to hand it over to my colleague Laura, who will now give the live demo of those survey templates.
Yes. So let's quickly start. So this is the main web page from of Collect Earth Online. So if you don't have a login, you need to register. Otherwise, you just enter, you just sign into, and this is the main page that is showing up. So first of all, you need to create a new institution. The institutions is where basically the country manage the projects. For example, a multi-purpose, and then you can type here the country. You can eventually also upload a logo, for example, okay, here we have a logo, a PAO logo, and eventually the logo of your institution, and a description of the activity that you are interested. Then you need to agree the term of reference, and then in this way you create your own institution. As it is now, the institution is empty, but what it will show in a further development is basically a list of projects that you can manage. For example, when the data collection is divided across regions within the country, and this is the first section. Then you have, as you can see here, these projects are all red because basically are not yet published. Then you have the imagery section where you can upload also your own data. For example, Sentinel, in this case, has been used some Sentinel data. You can also upload the new cloud-free data that are available from WMS. And in this case, you can also look for the details on the year, specific years that you can upload here. So, for example, here you can edit, you can choose the type of images. So if you are interested in adding a new imagery, you basically go into the institution, and then you add on the imagery section, you add a new imageries. Then here you can select if you have a feature collection, if you have an image asset or image collection asset, and then you type, you add the names and the attributes, and then you can add those images in your institution. The third part of the institution is the user, where you can decide if you allow the full admin control of the institution or a member as a member, or eventually you can remove also some user. With regard, for example, if you want to, just as an example, if we are interested to publish a survey, then we go into the institution and we select the survey, and then eventually you can click here on the pencil, and here this is the main interface of the summary of the projects. In this specific case, on the right side, you have a project management, and then you can publish. So here you can see the project is in draft mode. When it's published, then you're ready for the data collection. So, and the next step, when the data collection is completely, you need to close the project so that nobody can modify the data collection. So once the survey is published, you will see now the color of the survey is different in principle. So let's now try to, as Andreas was saying, this is the way the survey looks like. So you have these angle brackets where you can modify according to your specific needs. So this is it in the case of the ending here, and then of course you can have also you need to upload your classification system. So the different forest types, the different attributes that you want to in order to characterize the different classes. So this is basically the information, and So let's try to start with a survey that has been already filled in for a country where you have already typed the information. So this is land use 2025, for example. So as you can see in the first tab, you have this forest subdivision. I set up also some forest patch sites, the canopy cover. Eventually, you can also hide some questions. For example, if you're not interested to collect information on trees outside forest, you can eventually hide this information. So to hide instead of remove, it is simply here you can hide the question and save it, and then you will not be able to see again this information from the preview page. So how it looks like in an example of, for example, in this sample, the sample is an area of 0.1 hectare. In this case, you have also the dashboard, the geodash. The geodash is providing information across the years. In this case, we have a Sentinel-2 data, and as you can see here, you can see by zooming in, there is an area that is clear. You can also upload either true composite, or as in this case, this is a false composite with SWIR 1, 2, and red. These are particularly sensitive to healthy vegetation, SWIR 1 and 2, so they have a low reflectance once there is a moisture in the vegetation, so in a good condition. And also you can use this Landsat NDFI, so the fractional index over time, and you can actually visualize the information across the years. So in this case, this is SAR image, but you can also visualize and by clicking over the points over the actual observation for Landsat. So by exploring all the available satellite data, and also eventually you can export in and download a KML file. Basically, you are able to understand that there is something going on in a specific example, and that there is basically an oil palm plantations happening, so that we can see there is a land use change. So once you have collected all the relevant elements of your survey, you go here and you start your data collections, starting backwards. So you will see, okay, we have a crop plan, and this is a perennial crop. We don't have a presence of trees. And then you start collecting the change. As Andreas was mentioning, we have these 4 options: forest disturbance, forest recovery, and on the bottom corner, and the non-forest change and no change. These are the four options we have. In the case of forest disturbance, as in this case, we can have, we report the deforestation, we report the loss, and then we need to upload, we need to select the year of the loss and the subdivision before the deforestation, so a primary. And then you can report also the anthropogenic cause and the characteristic of the forest. So if it's commercial, if it's anthropogenic, yes. And then the characteristics of the forest patch. So it was a canopy cover. The sample is actually falling at the edge. So the idea is also to delineate, zooming out and see the landscape, and delineate the forest patch and assess the size of the forest patch, that is in this case is more than 1 hectare. And therefore continue with the collection of this information. Once the information is filled in, the tab change color and is no longer red. So the third is basically, as Andreas was mentioned, is related to the quality of the assessment. So it was easy. We use basically Landsat and Sentinel, and then you continue with this information. Okay. Just to quickly give you an information really regarding instead of collect, for the collect user, we have instead the possibility to create the new survey using the new template. So you select your language, and here you have this collector multi-purpose template, and then you can just you provide the name, and it's gonna okay, and then you can create. So so this is basically the two options where you can. So this is the collect the collect survey. And so then you can export, you upload your CSV file, and then you export the CSV file for the data collection in Collectert. And just last minutes, I just want to give introduction on this table. Has we were saying, this is a table that is trying to summarize the requirements depending on the different accounting frameworks. So the idea is that the country, before starting any data collection, try to clarify on the objective. Is keen in using the same data for R3 submission, for example, or UNFCCC. Then you can check and understand which data are required, and then of course understand the existing information the countries already have, and go through all this not question all this information. So it's basically the table is follow the same logic of the survey. So the first session goes through the IPCC classes. Of course, there are some information, particularly with regard the commercial, non-commercial, and the type of species that are actually of importance for R3 submission, especially the subdivision between plantation and natural vegetation, natural forest. Of course, for greenhouse gas inventory, there is this has called it stratification and subdivision across the IPCC classes. Also, with regard in the use of the emission factor in place in the country, and there is a kind of alignment of here also is mentioned ISFL with the UNFCCC IPCC guidelines, because also ISFL is more a landscape approach and is therefore accounting also for non-forest classes. So it's more comprehensive. And we have also other information with regard afforestation. So the transition there from non-forest to forest also have some specificities with regard to our trees, in particular for the period of 5 years before the transition, and therefore also a distinction between planted and natural, and for commercial and non-commercial purposes. So the idea is to double check all the information, making sure there are no data gaps. So that to avoid basically the country has to go through again another data collection. And everything is, of course, it depends also on the time and the human resources that the country have at that moment. So this is basically the overall idea. If you have a specific question on the survey, you can contact me, and then I give the floor to Andreas.
Thank you very much, Laura, for this comprehensive introduction to those templates. I think that is useful for the participants to get started on this. I don't want to lose much time and maybe directly head to the question and answer session. And maybe we can, questions have already been answered in the chat, but maybe we can read them out. I think the first question was related more to the sampling design or sampling distribution. And there was the question from Ergin, who asked if there's any standard or unified sampling distribution for all countries, and if it's sample plot based, and what is the design of the plot? Is there a unified method? I think Marika already answered to this and gave a bit of knowledge material here. But yes, there's no direct standard, but it needs to adhere what we call statistical rigor, which basically means it needs to be a probability sampling design, so either systematic design or some random distribution or stratified random. There was a slide at the beginning about the different methods. And this is basically up to the country. There are advantages and disadvantages to these different sampling designs. Basically, it boils down to systematic. You usually need a lot of points to capture rare phenomena such as deforestation or other land use changes. On the other hand, stratified random, you usually optimize your sampling for one or two categories, just like a deforestation or degradation, and you will obtain more precise results around those categories, but maybe you lose a bit of precision on others. The advantage being that you need much less samples as compared to systematic if you apply a proper stratification. Also on the sample plot, there are different designs and different recommendations on this. I don't think we can cover that yet here, everything, the considerations around that. The main message would be to be consistent in time with whatever sampling plot design you already selected. But yeah, there are some things that would need to be considered, but they are not necessarily subject of the webinar here. There was another question from Johannes. If CAO is able to assess also data through available Stack APIs, or does the user always need to get the resource himself herself? I was trying to basically try to link to Stack. It was one of the ESA platforms. And what I had to do was, if I remember correctly, I had to translate it somehow to a WMS server because Stack itself, but I'm not super familiar, so I might be wrong on that, but doesn't not necessarily provide the visualization parameters. And then basically what you need to do is like you call your Stack, but you provide certain visualization parameters, and then you can basically stream it as a web map service. And CEO itself, like if you go on this add new imagery, you will see all the options that you basically have to add auxiliary data. It works very well with Earth Engine image collections, image assets, feature collections. It does work very well with WMS. There are a couple of other options. But I don't think there's like directly a Stack API as for now. Yeah, Marika wants to take the next one, please.
Yeah, thanks. Then Ayan from Turkey. Thank you also very much for your feedback and your questions. So Ayan was pointing out, like, well, for carbon markets, there are all these precision requirements. That it might happen that you use a slightly different methodology. Yes, it does. It happens all the time. But it is. This is exactly why. With Collect Earth, if you do pool all these exercises and get one data set that can fit multiple purposes, it will really help a lot, because it really is uncomfortable for countries to have all these different estimates out there, and then you constantly will have to explain why is why you're reporting this area to that, why this other area. So this is really for countries quite uncomfortable, and it could really undermine trust in the data, and it would be seen as a transparency issue. So yes, and especially countries that start from scratch. I understand Turkey already is. Ayan is mentioning is already using it for forest fire, wetland, many areas. So you probably already have a very elaborate response design for countries that start from scratch. Laura would have this template ready that countries can take and then make their own. So you can see that the questions in there will respond to reporting requirements for the UNFCCC, reporting requirements for our trees if you want to participate. If you're a tropical moist forest country, reporting requirements for TFFF, even though that's still in the making, so that might still be tweaked once the operations manual will be published. So no, you don't have to start from scratch. You could take that and then add in specific categories, specific data needs for your specific country. You want to cover the next?
Yes, I can do that. So that was on the translation into French. Yes, we're planning to translate those quite soon, both the survey as well as we can also try to basically ingest the transcription into some AI and let translate the transcription so that we basically can provide the content in French and maybe also in Spanish. Maybe also in other languages. I think there's no problem with that.
Chip in I miss it. Sorry, I want to chip in because I miss one important element on the survey phase, which is the last one, which is not because it's the less important is the survey rules. The rules, setting up rules are crucial for avoiding inconsistency and guarantee certain minimum level of data quality. So that's going to facilitate also the cleaning afterwards. There are different type of rules that are logical time sequence rules that guarantee a chronological order. So, for example, those related to the years. And of course, this needs to be also adjusted depending on how many years you are considering during the data collection. And there are some other type of inconsistent in logical rules more related on data thematic semantic content. For example, like in the first case here, we have a rule that is saying basically when you have a gain, you cannot have a cropland in the destination class, or the opposite case, you cannot have a deforestation if your ending class is forest. So there are different rules. Here as a default are the main rules. But then, of course, then countries can add specific rules, and at the end at the bottom, you can add the different type of rules. Another element, if there are no questions, is that I try to also create some codes, some acronyms to facilitate the navigation process also through the rule or through the survey question. So you can actually, L1 stands for first loss of first event, and then you can have, for example, under forest disturbance, you can have a subdivision change. So the subdivision change when you have a forest type transition from, for example, natural forest to plantation, or you can eventually have a disturbance without change. So when you have, for example, a decrease in canopy cover within the same forest type. So this forest disturbance and forest recovery are all related to forest vegetation dynamics. So for the forest recovery is the opposite. So you may have a gain, a simple afforestation, or a subdivision change that is, for example, from secondary to primary, and enhancement when you have increase in canopy cover within the same forest division. Country can add also eventually changes depending on the needs and depending on the length of the period. Yeah.
Laura, maybe as we're waiting, because I don't see any other questions, maybe I can ask you a question. So countries that already have, especially countries that are using a systematic sample, they will have many, many plots, and they have collected a lot of very detailed information on it. Say they've collected this in 2023. Now they want to see if after 2023 there has been any change events, any deforestation, especially between 2023 and 2025 included. Do they have to recollect all the information in the survey, or how can they go about that?
Well, not in principle, they can just simply adjust the survey, because basically what they will need is the second tab, which is the change. Basically the first change is going to be eventually the potential change in, let's say, 2026. So is in this specific case, if they need to update an existing data set, they can work on this specific tab and eventually say, okay, there is nothing changed compared to, let's say, 2025, and say, okay, they will just press no change. So it's important to bear in mind that most of the time, user visual interpreter will collect a stable situation, because rare events, the changes are very rare. So, and of course, if there is no change, then meaning that the situation remain as it is in the previous. So basically, the idea is to adjust this table, this tab, and this in this specific case is no longer needed. Yes, so this is basically yeah.
Great. I think there was another question that was about high uncertainty, right? So yeah, there was a question from one country which said that their estimates were still there are quite high uncertainties in certain features. So if there is any specific advice that you guys would give. I think we already mentioned that, like increasing the sample size would give you more precise estimates. But if you are sampling a feature that is very rare, you can go really off the charts and it becomes, you don't have budget for that. So what can they do?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit out of the scope of the webinar, but happy to answer that, because usually the uncertainties, it's if you look at the actual statistics behind that, as Marika is saying, so it's basically a function of sample size and, let's say, the rareness of whatever you're looking at. And if you look at something really, really rare, let's say, for example, you're an HFLD country that has very small deforestation, automatically your relative error will look really high. So you might even end up with 50% or more error. But a high error around something that is super, super rare is not necessarily bad. It's just like the mathematics behind, basically they play out like this. But if you look at the absolute numbers in terms of area, it is actually not that bad. Now, in terms of sampling design, yes, you have two options. Either you increase your samples, but there's obviously also a limit to that in terms of resources, but also because at a certain point in time, let's say, even if you add a lot of more samples, your gain in efficiency or your gain in reducing the error becomes less. And the second strategy in broad is basically to use stratification. There are different options, and this could be easily 1 or 2 webinars on its own around stratification. But basically, one is to use some sort of map that somehow, of course, concentrates your samples in those areas that you want to do. There's another one that could help as well, which is known as post-stratification. So, for example, if you use a systematic grid, but you don't have the resources to intensify it, you could use a map and then apply what's called a post-stratified estimator. And this usually reduces your uncertainty a bit, especially around rare classes. And it also has the advantage post-stratification that you could use like different maps for different parameters. So you could, for example, use one that is entirely looking just at the forest change. And then if you maybe want to use it for more general land use changes, you could try to use some land cover or map that covers more classes. Again, like I keep it with this because otherwise we're not going to finish it.
Thanks. Vanessa just shared in the chat also an e-learning course that is recently launched on uncertainty. So I encourage also to look into that.
Yeah, just want to add something related to the quality of the data, as also to answer to be compliant with the R3s and multi-interpretation assessment. Is important that to underline that under the plot design phase, you can also provide you have a control to distribute the sample in different ways as a percentage of the equal assignment, and you can assign assign a user the visual interpretation of specific samples, and also put in place a quality control measure, for example, overlap, and you can eventually decide a percentage of how many samples you want that are over visually interpreted by multiple user, or you can control the number of user, and also there you can put in place some QAQC protocol to ensure also consistency and quality in the data collection.
There's another question from Edgar, who's asking for advice on interpretation accuracy reporting for systematic or sample-based approaches. So yeah, that's still quite an untapped field. And we are basically, with this survey, we're moving a small step forward on this, as we do have these questions on how hard is the interpretation, trying to gather information that basically, yes, Laura's just showing that, that basically helps us also understand after the data collection, what might be the possible reasons on for the quality of the sample interpretation. We also do apply, let's say, methods that are cited in the scientific literature, for example, multi-interpreter analysis, but right now we're using this rather before the data collection to understand how well the interpreters are aligned. And there are methods, but yeah, it's still quite an untapped field. So, but we're looking into that, let's say.
We're at the hour.
Yes.
I think we're at the hour. Yes. If you have additional questions, you can get in touch with us. It was a pleasure to have you all. I hope you found this informative. Vanessa was sharing a link within the chat on a survey where you could provide some feedback. I think it really just takes like 2 minutes or so. I think it's just like 4 or 5 questions, but that would help us also to coordinate our work and see where we can put efforts in future. So it would be nice if you can take this 2 minutes on this. For the rest, I think the speakers, Marike and Laura, and also Vanessa, that you haven't seen, but she organized everything on the back and set everything up. So thank you very much. And I wish everybody a good day and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.